So a very good evening to all of you and a very happy Diwali. You know, in some states in India, they're celebrating it today, whereas in Delhi, we celebrated it yesterday. So I think people have the hangover and not many people have, I think, shown up today. But still, we have a good crowd. And I take this opportunity to welcome our teacher today here, Venerable Karma Tsöndrü. Very warm welcome to you, sir, for accepting so graciously to come here and teach. I believe it's your second teaching here in our center. Time. Last time I was not there, I'm sorry, but I was traveling at that time. So I'm very happy that I'm here today to welcome you. So just a brief introduction of Venerable. Venerable Karma Tsöndrü was born in Israel in 1971 and encountered Buddhism during his first backpacking trip to India in 1997. In 2001, he quit his software engineering career to study Buddhism in India. In 2003, Venerable joined the FPMT's Lotsawa Rinchen Zangpo Translator Program in Dharamsala and subsequently became the translator-interpreter at Chenrezig Institute in Australia, where he lived and worked for 18 years, primarily translating for the resident geshes covering all levels of Buddhist study. By the way, I am the director of the translation program in Dharamsala. You
really?
Yes.
All right.
So I'm your boss.
Okay, well, just gonna crack a whip and I'll do what you say.
Okay. Over time, Venerable also taught entry-level and intermediate courses, assisted with the advanced study program, and taught at other centers. He toured the Gelug Lamas such as Gandhan Tree Rinpoche and Jadar Rinpoche. In 2014, Venerable Karma Tsöndrü received Gelong ordination from Venerable Tai Situ Rinpoche. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I think that Tai Situ Rinpoche said a few times that the first time that he ever taught outside of the Tibetan community was here at Tushita Center.
Yes, so we have a long history with Rinpoche.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Since 2023, Venerable has traveled between India, Taiwan, Israel, and Australia for study retreats, translation, and teachings. So we are very fortunate to have you with us today, and I think you are going to give us a teaching on joyous effort and the 4 powers which deal with the power of aspiration, steadfastness, joy, and rest. So we look forward to your teaching today. May I request you to teach now? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So good evening, everyone, and happy Diwali. And so, first thing first, it's good to start off with correcting our motivation. And what I thought of doing today is to speak of the 4 powers which are conducive for developing a sense of enthusiasm about doing the good thing, the right thing, the positive thing. So it is taken, of course, from the Buddhist tradition, but I think that it is also applicable to other things that you do in your life. You just have to be somewhat creative to find ways to apply whatever you find within the Dharma to other areas in your life. So you can be, of course, a Buddhist practitioner and enhance your practice during using those 4 powers of joyous effort. But you can also be a practitioner of another tradition, or you can see yourself as being totally secular and still kind of adopt the principle and see if you can find creative ways to really be good and have endurance about what you're doing. So to be able to engage with that, at least from a Buddhist perspective, we first off start with correcting our motivation so that even listening to a certain discourse or thinking about it and then putting it into practice will in itself become a Buddhist practice. And we do that through going for refuge. And we can also turn that to be something that contributes to a Mahayana accumulation of virtue. And we do so through thinking of bodhicitta and thinking of great compassion. And so it's quite common to start a session first off with going for refuge and arousing bodhicitta. For those of you who are Buddhist, then definitely you're welcome to do that. But for those of you who do not necessarily see yourself as Buddhist for the time being, that's completely fine, okay. You can just think that you're going to try to make your mind better, perfect as much as you can. And if there's something that you can get or gain from being here today, you can open your heart, open your mind to it, and hopefully some things will be useful. So whenever I start either a meditation session or just a practice in general, first off, start with calming my mind. And I take about a minute just to make sure that my body feels right and also my mind feels right. And so we can just take maybe a few deep breaths and calm our mind. And think that we are bringing our mind back into our inner space from whatever we've been doing today or in the past few days. Trying to make sure that there is no tension or discomfort in our body. And we're going to follow the breath for 10 rounds, 10 counts of breathing in and breathing out, using the breath as an anchor for settling our mind without being too intense or too lax, trying to find an even balance in our breathing process for 10 breaths. And in correcting our motivation today, for those of you who see yourself as Buddhist, think that you want to make your mind perfect. And that also applies to those of you who do not necessarily see yourself as Buddhist. We're working with our mind, trying to develop positive qualities. And we're trying to eliminate faults and drawbacks, anger, attachment, ignorance, pride, jealousy. We're trying to develop positive qualities such as generosity and ethics and patience, wisdom, love and compassion, understanding. And from a Buddhist perspective, we rely upon the Buddha, the historical Buddha, as our teacher, the one who taught us refuge. And we rely upon the teachings of the Buddha that were taught from an enlightened mind, a mind that was made perfect, having all positive qualities and no faults whatsoever. And we also rely upon the Sangha, not only immediate Sangha, those who are around us, but when we think of the centuries from the time of the Buddha and up until now, and great masters that have evolved all across Southeast Asia, and of course, first and foremost in India. In Tibetan Buddhism, we follow mainly the Nalanda tradition with great Indian masters that for us also become Sangha. Nagarjuna and Sangha and Shantideva, Shakyaprabha, Gunaprabha, Aryadeva, Buddhapalita, Baba Viveka and others. And great master tradition, Jetsun Kappa. And lineages of teachers up until the present day. His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Kabje Lama Sopa Rinpoche and Sita Rinpoche that was here for, been coming, I think, here for 40 years or more. So for us, they are Sangha. And so we think that we are relying upon them to develop positive qualities and eliminate the faults in our mind so that we can make our mind perfect for the sake of all living beings that extend to the reaches of space, to be able to meet them where they are and to show them also the way to develop positive qualities and eliminate faults. So with that in mind, for those of you who know the verse for going for refuge in bodhicitta, maybe I'll say it a couple of times in English, and last recitation would be in Tibetan, for those of you who know the verse. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. By the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. By the accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chonan tsoki chonan la chanchu badu dani kyam suchi dagi jinso gi betonangi drola penchi sangye droparshu. All right. So, let's start. And so I thought of speaking today about the 4 powers for developing joyous effort. But first off, since we are going to look at joyous effort today, I wanted to say a few words about joyous effort in general, where we find the teachings on joyous effort within the Buddhist tradition, what the definition of joyous effort is, and that will lead us at some point to cultivating the things which are conducive for developing effort. And so the word for joyous effort in Tibetan is Tsöndrü. Actually, that's my name, Karma Tsöndrü. When I took ordination from Tai Situ Rinpoche, who gave me the name Karma Tsöndrü Taya. So Karma is the name of the lineage, and Tsöndrü is joyous effort, and Taya means limitless. Whereas, I think that probably have very limited joyous effort, have boundless laziness. And so maybe one day I will endeavor in a proper way. But the word for joyous effort in Tibetan, Tsöndrü, is the same word for being diligent in whatever we do. So we can become diligent about different things. But the Buddhist understanding of what Tsöndrü or joyous effort is quite specific. It's about being enthused about virtue. And virtue from a Buddhist perspective is that which by type results in something positive, something that has a meaning to us in terms of a long-term goal or even short-term goal, which means securing or seeking a state of happiness and well-being. So being enthused about it, being enthused about creating the cause and conditions for long-term happiness and well-being is what joyous effort is. And so all Buddhist traditions practice joyous effort. And when I say all Buddhist traditions, we have, of course, the Mahayana traditions all across Southeast Asia, and here we follow mainly Tibetan Buddhism. But we also have Theravada tradition in Southeast Asia, in places like Sri Lanka and Myanmar and so forth. So all those Buddhist traditions need to cultivate that sense of joyous effort, being enthused about virtue. But when you look at where we approach joyous effort in our tradition, Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the teachings on joyous effort are found along the Mahayana teachings in the set of teachings that belong to the six perfections. So we have the six perfections, generosity and ethics and patience and joyous effort. That's the fourth one. Then concentration or dhyana, absorption, concentration, and then wisdom. And so joyous effort is presented as what bodhisattvas practice in order to attain the state of enlightenment. And definitely, hands down, bodhisattvas need to have a lot of joyous effort in order to become Buddhas. But in fact, anyone, even if you want to attain the state of liberation alone, you have to be enthused about it. Even if what you seek is only nirvana, you're not interested for the time being in becoming Buddha or in practicing the six perfections, generosity, and so forth. Even if you just want to attain a good state of rebirth in your next lifetime, you need to have a certain degree of joyous effort. For without being enthused about what you do, you're not going to be inclined to really put whatever you need in order to do so. And so everyone needs joyous effort. But also I think that if you're a practitioner of another religion, another tradition, you also need to have a sense of enthusiasm about doing the right thing, whatever might be your spiritual affiliation. I mean, if you believe in a creator God, for example, if you believe that God will reward you if you do a positive thing and will punish you if you act in a negative way, really, if you look at it as a set of rules that are enforced upon you from an outside source, and you have to abide by those rules, otherwise you're going to be punished, it's going to be more difficult to do the right thing and to avoid negative behavior. Whereas if you think that this is something that I can do for myself, I can do everything in my need, everything in my capacity to attain the state of, in order to go to heaven and avoid a birth in hell, you feel more empowered to do it. It's your own choice and you become enthused about it. Anyway, from a Buddhist perspective, joyous effort is to delight, to be totally enthused about it. And in order to do so, we need to stop laziness, or at least reduce laziness. And I have to tell you, I have to disclose it, I'm totally lazy. Normally I'm very lazy. And so if you feel lazy, you have a friend here. When I think of the different types of laziness that were taught in the Buddhist tradition, and they're given different names and different terms, sometimes I think about it in a very practical way. Like, for example, laziness of being just idle, procrastinating. Who doesn't procrastinate? I mean, if I want to start a meditation session, I always find other things that I need to do first before doing my meditation session. And that's linked up with another type of ignorance, which is ignorance of being attracted to ignoble, in a sense that I always choose things of secondary importance over Dharma practice. It's like yesterday I arrived at Delhi from Sherabling, from Himachal, and I still had my commitments, meditation commitments to do. And honestly, I was sitting in front of my computer, browsing different things, looking at the news, looking at YouTube. Then I watched an episode of something, choosing to do other things than actually getting down and doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's the type of laziness. And also laziness of discouragement, thinking that I'm not good enough. How can someone like me can ever do that? It's actually quite interesting, because I think that in English, I don't know if in Hindi, but that sense of lack of self-confidence is not regarded as laziness. But from a Buddhist perspective, it's a type of laziness. If you feel that you're not worthy, you're not good enough, how can someone like you do that? It's considered to be a type of laziness because it's solely opposite to being enthused about doing the right thing. So there are different things that we can do in order to overcome laziness. One of the things that we can do is to think of, first of all, death and impermanence, which is, can sound quite heavy, but it is a really beautiful way to reorganize our priorities. In a sense that when we think of how much time we procrastinate our spiritual practice, I mean, so many of us, including myself, have that idea that when we retire, as monastics, we never retire, but still, when we get to a later stage in our life, we'd be able to spend more time doing Dharma practice. And so we put our Dharma practice on the back burner, and now we have other things, important things that we need to attend to. And of course, we do have important things in our life. I don't underestimate that. And so, particularly when you're still young and you're raising your family, or you need to go to work and you have children that you need to attend to, and you have responsibilities for your family, for your parents and so forth, of course, there are things that you need to do. But still, we can make our life way more simple when we think of death and impermanence, in the sense that if I think that I'm going to remain alive for 1 more year or 5 more years or 10 more years, what are the things that are really important to me in my life? Of course, my relationship with my family, with my friends and so forth are important in the sense that I want to have a meaningful relationship with them, and as much as possible to not get angry with them, not have conflicts, not have complicated relationship, and if I do have complicated relationship, then at least may I be able to solve some of it, to make reparation, to make it better. And so thinking of death and impermanence is a really good engine for motivating us to do the right thing. But also, when we become discouraged about the goal, thinking, how can someone like me ever do that? We can think that there's really, when we think about the quality of our mind, the nature of our mind is not different to the nature of the mind of the Buddha, the historical Buddha. It's not different to the nature of the mind of contemporary practitioners, contemporary masters. The nature of my mind is not different to the nature of the mind of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Of course, I mean, his mind is very different to mine in the sense that he has developed positive qualities, perfect qualities, and eliminated all faults, but there is nothing in me that prevents me from doing that myself. Anger is not ingrained within my mind. Attachment is not ingrained within my mind. Ignorance is not ingrained within my mind, although sometimes it does seem to be the case. In that, when we think of, for example, how difficult it is to rid ourselves of anger, I mean, it takes just like a snap, not a snap decision, but something slight happens and we become enraged. Something just slight is presenting itself to our mind and we become completely obsessed with it, thinking that it will bring us some long-term happiness and satisfaction and bliss and comfort and so forth. And we might cultivate an antidote to that, but doing a one-off thing is not enough. We need to get it, again and again and again for years and decades, to the point where, particularly when we have high expectations of ourselves, when we think that I've been a Buddhist practitioner for 1 year, for 3 years, for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years, I should have been already 30% enlightened, or 50% enlightened, or maybe all the way up to enlightenment, and I'm still getting angry. It seems that to us that it's impossible to rid ourselves of all those negative qualities. So when we look really deeply into the nature of the mind, we do recognize that none of those adventitious stains or temporary stains are ingrained within the nature of our mind. We are creatures of habits, and we've been so habituated with responding in a negative way, or sometimes in ways that seem to us to be positive, but is still problematic. We've been so accustomed to afflictive states of mind since time without beginning and up until now. So of course, it's very difficult to undo those deep habits, but it's possible. And it's possible to do it if we then also cultivate the 4 powers, the 4 conducive conditions for joyous effort. And this is the main thing that I wanted to speak of today. So how are we doing so far? Okay. And so of the 4 powers of joyous effort, the first one is called the power of esteem. Sometimes it is called also the power of interest. That's the first one. Then the second power is the power of stability or steadfastness. That's the second. The third one is the power of joy. And the fourth is the power of rest or suspension. I like this power, the power of rest. I'm pretty good at resting. But when we look at the meaning of resting, it's slightly different to just kind of kicking back and relaxing. So first thing first, the power of interest or the power of esteem. So those powers are presented in a really beautiful way. First off, if you want to look at the source for that, in Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. So Shantideva was an Indian master that lived, as far as I remember, in the 7th century. And the 7th century was the time in which Buddhism started to travel from India to Tibet. And so often for me, a student of Tibetan Buddhism, when I listen to my Tibetan teachers and they speak volumes and they speak so highly of Shantideva, it seemed to be in some sense so remote and distant from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but actually they were active around, let's say, similar time, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, Shantideva wrote a few texts, but I think that the most famous one is the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, or Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, consisting of 10 chapters, and the 7th one is the chapter on joyous effort. And so Shantideva spoke of, first of all, what joyous effort is, and spoke about the powers or the things which are incongruous with joyous effort, laziness, namely, and then the positive factors contributing to joyous effort. So this is the main source for those 4 powers, but also for those of you who might be familiar with Tsongkhapa's works. And Je Tsongkhapa, one of the most famous texts that Je Tsongkhapa wrote was the Lamrim Chem, or the Great Exposition on the Steps of the Path to Enlightenment. And in the 2nd volume, in the English translation, there's a presentation of the perfection of joyous effort, and also a really succinct and approachable presentation of the 4 powers. So that's the source. So first off, the power of esteem, the first power, is mainly about having that deep sense of interest and esteem to the working in karma, the working of karma, sorry. So to really be diligent, in a sense, to be enthused about doing the right thing, doing good, creating virtue, you have to believe that there is something in there for you. But not just in general. When you look deeply at the Buddhist presentation of karma, but that of course is related to the Indian presentation of karma, basically positive actions produce positive results. Negative actions produce suffering or negative results in general. So we have to start with having that deep sense of conviction in the working of karma. And I think that for you guys, it's much easier. I just assume, I don't know. But no, I did not grow up in Indian culture, Buddhist culture, Hindu culture. Well, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you guys can tell me, whether you're Buddhist or whether you're Hindu, in general, in India, it's way easier to think of karma. Am I right? So for someone like me, I did not grow up with any religion. I grew up in Israel. I was born into a Jewish family, but we were completely secular. We weren't God-fearing people. We never we've never done any religious things. So karma was not something that I grew up with. And when we think of karma in general, in a really rough way, we can understand the mechanism of karma. You do a positive action, it produces a positive result. You create a negative action, it produces a negative result. We can see that happening in this life. Like if you punch someone, it is likely that you're going to be punched back. If you insult someone, it's very likely that that person is going to respond in kind, or being a little bit aggressive. Not everyone, but in general. Or if you behave in a positive way, if you are kind to people, if you speak nicely to people, if you help people, you're going to have a good image, and other people will also come across to you, mostly in a positive way. So we can understand the working of karma in a really close way. But then when you start to look at the subtleties of karma, it's more difficult to understand. Or maybe if you're told about it, you can understand that, but really to have full conviction that this is the way that things work is way harder. Particularly because from a Buddhist perspective, and also I guess that from the perspective of many Hindu traditions, Indian traditions, that speak of past and future lifetimes, we kind of accept the existence of past and future lifetimes as of course there are. But again, for me, I didn't grow up with that idea that there are past and future lifetimes. I never had to think about it until I came across the Buddhist traditions, and so it's way harder to really have that deep sense of conviction in the working of karma. For the whole basis for the presentation of karma is, first of all, thinking of the continuity of mind. In that, in this life, I have a mind, I have a consciousness. And when we look at it from a Buddhist perspective, the argumentation that we're using is that the current moment of consciousness came from a previous moment of consciousness. And the previous moment of consciousness came from the one prior to that. So when we trace back moment of consciousness, and we then come up with that question, so where did my consciousness at birth came from? From a Buddhist perspective, we say, well, it came from previous lifetime. So if we have a continuity of consciousness, in some sense we can say that there is a repository for karmic imprints that can travel with a consciousness from previous lifetime to this lifetime. So we can say that roughly. But really, it's really difficult to understand what mind is. I mean, I can say that my current moment of consciousness came from previous moment of consciousness, and that came from the prior moment of consciousness. It sounds very logical, but really to have firm conviction and trust that this is indeed the case, we have to really come to know our mind better. Not only to know our mind better, but also to understand in general, in an academic or intellectual way, what mind is, what are the different mental processes that go through our mind, what are positive states of mind and negative states of mind, which states of mind are correct, in line with reality, which one of them are totally not in line with reality, erroneous. And then based upon also the experience that we develop in our meditation practice, we can come to understand mind in a better way. And when it becomes experiential, when we can see not only the mind, but also the nature of the mind, we have a more solid basis to then thinking that the mind is not a product of the body. Of course, it depends upon the body, but it's not a product of the body. It is affected by the body, in that physical states, of course, can contribute to mental cloudiness or vagueness, particularly when we grow older. We have certain medical conditions, dementia, and such, which of course do depend upon the body, the working of the brain, neurons and so forth. But also the body affects the mind, but also the mind can affect the body. Like for example, if you look at neuroscience, neuroplasticity, as far as I remember, this is the term, how we can train our mind doing a particular thing, and new pathways of neurons are being created in our mind. So the body can change the mind in some sense, but also the mind can change the body. So they do work in synergy, but the mind is not the body, and the body is not the mind. So this is also something that we then need to look at, that we need to think of when we look at what the mind is. Anyway, the point is that if there is that entity that is called mind, and we can also establish a continuity of mind, of consciousness, not only in this life, but also then think that my mind in this life came from previous life, and the mind from this life will go to a future rebirth once this body dies, then we have a basis for then thinking of karma. In that we have many, you can say, unexplained events in this life. We're trying to do good and we fail. We're doing badly, but we're still, pretty happy in our life. From a Buddhist perspective, we can speak about how, any positive results that we experience in this life is a result of positive actions that we've cultivated in previous lives. Negative results that we experience in this life are results of negative actions that we've done in previous lifetimes. And then when we look at the characteristics of karma, karma is definite in that positive actions definitely produce positive results. It is impossible for positive actions to produce negative results. Negative actions definitely, hands down, result in negative results unless we purify them. It is impossible for negative actions to produce positive results. And also, karma increases in that we've created an action, negative actions, let's say. If we just let it be, if we leave it like that, without purifying it, from a Buddhist perspective, it grows and increases. It's like a snowball over time. We do not experience the results of actions that we have not done in the past, and actions done do not go to waste. So I'm connecting all of it with the power of esteem. The power of esteem is, first of all, having high esteem of karma. Really, if you're not convinced in your heart that positive actions will produce positive results, it is likely that you'll be less inclined to work hard in order to do the right thing. Particularly when certain spiritual practices, or just the approach that you have to your life, is more challenging. Particularly when you think of our goal, from at least from a Mahayana perspective, our goal is to become Buddha. I mean, it's a mammoth project. It's humongous. There are so many causes and conditions that we need to create in order to become Buddha, and we need to have long-term approach to that, rather than think that I'm going to be able to do it in the next few years or in this lifetime. Of course, we do have the potential, making it possible to become Buddha in this lifetime, but it's likely to not happen to someone like me who is like totally lazy. I haven't nailed Joyous effort. I can speak about it, but there's a lot of room for improvement, at least with me. And so you have to be, first of all, totally convinced that if you do the right thing, you will likely to not experience the result in this life, but in future lifetimes. It's pretty difficult, isn't it? Particularly when our senses approach is so focused on this lifetime. I mean, this is I guess in most cases, these are our sets of priorities. How are we going to improve this lifetime? How are we going to make it better? How are we going to be more successful? How are we going to be able to contribute to our family, to our business, to our name, to our reputation? How are we going to take care of all those different things? This is our orientation. And so when we think of this long-term project of not only becoming Buddha, but also just to emerge from samsara, to leave samsara and attain the state of nirvana, I mean, how much effort is needed? Not only effort, but we have to make our life more simple. And of course, every once in a while, we encounter teachings and teachers that say that you can become enlightened in this very lifetime if you only practice mindfulness, if you realize the nature of the mind and liberation is here and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, it's all true. However, you have to be committed to doing so. So, if I think of my lifestyle, traveling around and watching Netflix and, drinking coffee with friends and so forth. Yeah, if I do meditate on the nature of the mind and I meditate on it for a few hours a day, I can attain the state of Buddha, but no, I'm not doing it. I'm still kicking back and relaxing from time to time. Rest. Yeah, the power of rest. And so I guess that my point is that first off, with the power of conviction, the power of esteem, the power of interest, you need to be kind of totally resolute in your mind that there is a value in what you do, that you are going to practice virtue and you're going to do it from the bottom of your heart without needing someone else to motivate you, to push you, to tell you that that's the right thing to do. It has to come from within. So that's the first power. So when we think of our mind, our attitude, as I said, no, I'm not there yet. I know that I have room for improvement, but I'm trying. I'm working on it. I'm making a progress over time. And so then to that we can look at the second power, which is the power of steadfastness, the power of stability. And then we also need to develop a long-term approach to a spiritual practice in order for it to become stable. And there are a few aspects to that. One of the aspects is to have, first of all, realistic expectations of ourselves. As Renuka said, I lived at Chenrezig Institute for 18 years and I've been involved with Buddhism since the late 90s. And over the years, I've met quite a few people that were so enthused about the Buddhist tradition from their initial contact with Buddhism that they had that idea that it is possible to do it, to attain everything, to become perfect just within a few years of practice. Some of them have become so enthused about it that they've sold the business, they've sold the house. Some of them went as extreme as they finished their relationship, left their partner, blah, 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 and thought that they could only spend some time doing spiritual practice and become enlightened in no time. For the vast majority of them, they failed because the expectations were totally unrealistic. And so setting a long-term goal without expecting too much of ourselves is crucial. It's a key to developing stability. Because when we then, sometimes we have high expectations of ourselves and we fail. And when we fail, we think that it's not working and therefore I should be doing something else. I can be doing something else. And we leave things undone or half done. And we develop habits. So developing habits of starting something and then dropping it and starting something else and not finishing it and then going off and doing something else and not finishing it, we create those mental habits. Which means that, first of all, the commitment that we have made to ourselves and sometimes to others, we dropped it off. There could be some negative actions, a negative action associated with it, but also we're creating imprints, mental habits of taking up things and not finishing them. So that's going to be a big problem for us, for the attainment of the fruit of our spiritual practice. And so to develop stability, it is said, at least in Shantideva's text, it's also explained in a really nice way, beautiful way in Tsongkhapa's text, we need to develop something that is called pride. That from the Buddhist perspective is considered to be quite negative, right? We don't want to be proud. Pride is an affliction. But when Shantideva or Tsongkhapa said that we need to develop pride, they speak about something else. Not pride as an affliction, but to really to have, first of all, self-confidence and to have certainty about what we're going to do. So we need to have pride in our actions, in thinking that this is what I need to do, and I don't need to sit around and wait for others to do the work for me, or I don't need to be supported by others, but this is something that I need to do by myself. So for example, if my goal is to attain the state of enlightenment so that I will be able to be of benefit to countless living beings, and I'm motivated by compassion, that sees that sentient beings are beset by suffering, that are bereft of happiness, then pride in action is thinking that I need to liberate sentient beings from suffering. It's not someone else's job, it's my job. And it's not that I can sit around and wait for others, for other bodhisattvas to come around or other Buddhas to come around and help others, but if I could do it by myself alone, I would do it. So developing that self-confidence, that commitment is called pride in actions. So it's also, when you think about it in relation to stability, if we're going to develop that commitment in our practice, that this is what I need to do, not just like a one-off thought, but really a solid practice of thinking of karma actions and the results, but also setting a goal that is realistic. The pride in action is going to be helpful, supportive, but also we're going to be able to support the development of pride in action. And also we need to also develop pride in our capacity to do it, in our ability to do it, because why would we not be able to do it? So here we first of all need to then think of things which are in our ability to do. Not to take up for the time being things which are outside of the realm of our abilities. Like for example, when I think of the great Tibetan yogi Milarepa, maybe some of you have heard about Milarepa, or someone like Mingyur Rinpoche, more of a contemporary master. Have you heard of Mingyur Rinpoche? So Mingyur Rinpoche is a meditation prodigy, if I can put it like that. It's like a total meditation genius. And he did his first 3-year retreat when he was, I can't remember if it was when he was 14 or 17, but he did something that no one else did before him. Like he entered into a 3-year retreat when he was in his teens, late teens. A couple of years ago, I was in Nepal, and I spoke with a friend of mine, a Nepalese friend of mine. He said that there's a term in Nepal that describes these teenage monks. They call them hormonally insane. So I guess that it's not only applies to teenage monks, but I guess it applies to most teenagers, being hormonally insane. And so imagine kind of going into a 3-year retreat when you're in that phase of your life. And he did it not only once, he did I think 2 or 3 sets of the 3-year retreat, and then he went on to doing what is called, let's say in English, a wandering retreat, or in Tibetan it's called chadra, where you give up all worldly activities and you just spend your life as a wandering yogi. And so when I think of my ability to do it, I'm not there yet. I mean, I wish I'd be able to do it, but really, I don't think that psychologically I'm there. Maybe if I put myself to the test, I'd be able to know how much I can cope with that. But I've been watching from time to time interviews with the homeless in the US and kind of thinking of their lifestyle. It's not a life choice, but kind of thinking of their description of what they are going through. And I try to imagine how it would be like for myself to do it. It sounds really, pretty hard going. And so my point is that we need also to be realistic about what we can do and what we cannot do. I'm not Mingyur Rinpoche, I cannot do what he does. And so if I commit myself to do what he does, it is likely that I will fail. I will not complete the task. So I need to know my limitations. I need to know what I can do, but also I need to push myself. If I only surrender to easy things I can do for the time being, of course I will not make progress. So I need to push myself. I need to do more retreats. And if I start to extend myself to do more retreats, if I'm used to doing a month's retreat, I can go into a 3 months retreat. If I'm used to a 3 months retreat, I can do a 6 months retreat. So I can always increase bit by bit. So knowing our limitations and then setting goals that are commensurate with our limitations, pushing the boundaries a little bit, but not taking up too much is crucial. Being practical is crucial. So if we then develop pride in our ability, when we know what our capabilities are, then we can think, why would I not be able to do it? We can bring into that discussion, of course, the fact that all of us have Buddha nature. That there is no affliction, as I said, that is ingrained within the nature of our mind. And the nature of my mind is not different to the nature of Taiseido Rinpoche, of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and so forth. It's not different to it. So it's not different to the nature of the mind of Buddha. And Buddha started off as being an ordinary person, just as the life story of the historical Buddha tells. So why would I not be able to do it myself? If I set goals which are realistic, I'll be able to do it. So that's pride in our ability. And then we also need to have pride over the afflictions, which is again a sense of commitment not to submit to our afflictive states of mind. In thinking that I shall vanquish my afflictions. In thinking that I will vanquish my afflictions, I will not let them win. And of course they win from time to time or quite often. But then we need to have that self-confidence that we'll be able to do it over time, that we will stop submit to our afflictive states of mind. So that's also really important in terms of developing stability, or the power of steadfastness, that will allow us to have a better continuity of spiritual practice. And so when I think about it in terms of long-term approach to a Dharma practice, so a long-term approach to Dharma practice depends, I think, mostly on the first two powers that I mentioned. First off, having a trust in the working of karma, trusting that doing good will yield positive results, acting in a negative way will produce negative results, if not in this lifetime, definitely in future lifetimes. And when we then think about it and apply it to our daily life, day after day after day, we need to become stable in what we do. To become stable in what we do is not about making a drastic change to our life. It's not about living what we do, what we've done so far, and embarking on something that is completely new, but to then bring karma into whatever we do in our daily life. And so I say that most of you here, I just assume that you have families, you have jobs, you have things that you need to attend to. So of course, dropping everything and then dedicating yourself only to meditation or to Buddhist practice, going on Himalaya pursuit like Mingyur Rinpoche, it's not going to work out. I mean, this is totally out of the question. But we bring our contemplation of karma into our daily life. And we then also think of, for the sake of stability, we think of other practices that we can introduce into our daily life. So we have lots of at least in this tradition, the Gelug tradition, that is one of the biggest traditions, of the biggest traditions within Tibetan Buddhism. So we have great texts that were composed by masters such as Tsongkhapa, which are also based on Indian masters. So we can take those texts, the steps of the path of enlightenment, or texts of mind trainings, 37 practices of bodhisattvas, the 8 verses of mental transformation. We take all of those different texts, and as much as we can, we try to apply them to our daily life, in thinking that for me it's going to be something that I will do for the rest of my life, rather than thinking that it will yield a result for me tomorrow or next year or in 10 years from now. It's just something that I will be doing for the rest of my life. So it doesn't matter how long will it take, because what else will I be doing? I mean, is there any point in time in which we will stop practicing the 8 verses for training the mind? Is there any point in time in which we will no longer be following the steps of the path of enlightenment? Of course, there will be a point when we become Buddhas. When we become Buddhas, the practice will be part and parcel of who we are. But until then, it's just like what I do daily. And so thinking about it as long term, not only in this life, but also thinking that I need to create the habits, cause and conditions that will allow me to do it in future lifetimes, it's actually something that is quite relaxing, because I think that the pressure is off to produce results, quantitative results. And anyway, how do you quantify it anyway? It's very difficult to quantify the spiritual progress that we've been going through. I think that maybe now I can look at my mind. I'm in my mid-50s. I can look at my mind and say that my mind is now better than how it used to be 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But also, to be honest, I'm probably smarter than when I was like just a stupid 25-year-old guy. So, you grow up, you experience life in a variety of ways, so you become wiser anyway. But I believe that also my study and my practice have also contributed to a certain degree of what how my mind is now. At least I would like to think so. So that's the power of stability, right? So if I were to summarize it, setting realistic goals, developing pride in actions, thinking that this is what I will do, this is for me to do. I have the power to do it, it's in my ability, and I will work on my mind. I will not submit to my afflictive states of mind. And of course, when they arise, we have a set of antidotes that we can apply to reduce the power of our afflictive states of mind. And we have ample antidotes for anger, for attachment, for jealousy and pride and so forth. So we can do it. And then we have the power of joy. That's the third power. And the power of joy is not to feel that our practice is a burden, but to think about practice as honor. Not only as honor, but this is what I would like to do. Because if I really trust in the working of karma, if I really believe that whatever I do in my spiritual practice will produce positive results, I will be enthused about doing it. And it's also important not to take on too much. And so over the years, particularly at Chenrezig Institute in Australia, we were fortunate enough to have highly qualified spiritual masters, teachers that had visited the center. And of course, Khyentse Lama Sopa Rinpoche visited us a few times, but also His Holiness the Dalai Lama visited us at Chenrezig Institute, and we also had other masters. We had Kirti Tsentsab Rinpoche and Sakep Chinzin, and Chadu Rinpoche was there recently. So those teachers often come and they also give empowerments. Some people end up with having lots of empowerments and also lots of daily commitments, lots of recitations. For me, that approach does not necessarily work for me on the personal level. Like I don't want to have too many recitations daily, because then for me it becomes more of like blah, 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 and less kind of, if I need to recite these texts and then the other text and this amount of mantras, the other amount of mantras, I get too tired. So being able to take up something that is enough for me, will be suitable for me, and then to do it with a sense of joy, not to feel there is a burden, not to think that, oh my God, I still have 4 hours of recitations that I need to go through today. I know people that have 4 hours of recitations, and I hope for them that they enjoy it, but I know, and I think that when you look at teachers like Kyabje Lama Soba Rinpoche, or I think Chadron Rinpoche, Taisido Rinpoche, they can do it. I mean, they have that degree of enthusiasm. And for them, it's not a recitation. It's not blah, blah, blah. Actually, kind of the mind is so developed that for them, it's an actual genuine practice. But I'm not there yet. And therefore, I really need to kind of make sure that I find joy in my daily practice, not take up too much, but also not take up too little. I mean, if I don't have something, at least for me on a personal level, that will anchor my spiritual practice, it would be difficult to really be consistent about it. And so it is said that, first of all, you need to have joy in your practice. So how do you find joy in your practice? Well, again, you find joy, first of all, when you think about it in terms of karma, having a deep sense of karma, a deep trust in the working of karma. But also, I have to say that to me, when I think of the teachers that I feel closer to, if I do something, I put something into practice, and I think that they would be quite happy with me doing it, it brings me joy. So I've been following, for example, a meditation program that Taisido Rinpoche teaches. And since he's my ordination master, he's also one of my closest teachers, I'm really happy to continue doing those practices. And I find a source of inspiration. So not everyone has that source of inspiration. We do not necessarily need to have an external source of inspiration, but it can help. Definitely can help. To me, it's helpful. So we need to have joy in order to engage with something that is virtuous, but also we need to continue to have joy. In scripture, it says that we need to become insatiable. We cannot, it's not enough. I need to do more. And rather than I need to do more, I need to continue to do that. Because when joy is depleting, when we don't find that much inspiration, we tend to just leave our practices half done, or then they become a chore rather than something that we like doing. Right, so it is described sometimes as this type of joy that you have where it is like an elephant that rushes into a mud of pool in the heat of summer, that plunges into a cold water in the heat of the summer. And so I don't have it, but it's actually quite a nice description. I mean, I have to say that sometimes when when my heart is full of inspiration, when I'm doing retreat, or when I've finished retreat, or when I'm listening to teachers, I have spikes of inspiration, and then I really enjoy some of the practices that I do. And then over time, this enthusiasm diminishes somewhat, and then I need to make sure that I inject some more oomph into my practice. Or I read books, I listen to recordings, I watch a YouTube clip, and I can reignite the passion for doing that. And when I'm going through times which are more challenging, that is more difficult, then we have the fourth power, which is the power of rest, the power of it's called sometimes the power of relinquishment, the power of suspension, or the power of rest, which is also crucial. It is knowing when we need to take a rest. knowing how not to burn out. And Dharma burnout is not uncommon. Actually, I've met quite a few people that became quite fatigued, quite burned out from either studying too much or putting a lot of pressure on themselves. Particularly, I think that if I'm becoming a little bit, I'll try not to become too critical. But sometimes it can become like an organizational culture where you expect it to be like, for example, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that was known to be someone that's hardly ever sleeps, always cultivate virtue. And if you want to take a rest, it's more like you're disappointing Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It's like, you could be doing more. So, unfortunately, sometimes it's like part of this organizational culture where kind of like if you take a break, you're selfish. I mean, it's not, here I'm exaggerating, it's not that late, but you really need to make sure that you do not feel guilty about taking a break, because we do need a break from time to time. We do need to replenish. We do need to just give ourselves to cut some slack when we feel tired. Now, we can go out for a walk, we can take a break for a week. And when I say take a break, you can, I think that the idea is not to become too intense. Now, we can have a break from intensity. And once we are rested, it's not that we take a rest, indefinite rest, but once you feel rested, you need to be enthused to pick it up again. So knowing how to do it is definitely skillful means, because we need to know our own limitations. And often we end up being burned out without having recognized it before. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you need to experience it once to know how to not get there next time round. How else would you know your limitation, right? But it's really crucial to not feel guilty or not feel bad or not feel that you're not being a good Buddhist practitioner, you're not being a good Bodhisattva if you take a break. We have permission from Shantideva, that's to begin with. And then Lama Tsongkhapa also said that in his Lamrim Chemo, and I guess that other masters have said that also. And so if you do need a break, take it, yeah. So that's one part of the power of suspension, the power of relinquishment. And another part of it is once you finish a certain task, don't just stop and do nothing. Then go off and do something else. I don't know how it is here in India or in Delhi, but there are Buddhist centers that take their main practice, for example, just mindfulness. So you go on and do shamatha retreats. So you do one, and you finish a shamatha retreat. So then you can do another one, and you finish a shamatha retreat, and then you can do another one, and you finish that retreat. So when I think of the other type of the power of suspension or the power of rest, it means that you finish one practice, and then you aspire to do something that is more advanced, if you can do it, to take the next step, to progress. When you think of the bigger picture, progressing through all the different stages to the path and all the stages that lead to enlightenment. If you're only going to do mindfulness retreats, so if you're only going to do shamatha meditation, yeah, it's great. I definitely do not underestimate those practices, but really we need to have the big picture to know that once you finish one thing, then it's time to take the next step and follow that through. And the same thing, I guess, that can apply to whatever you do in your spiritual study. So if you have an ongoing study program that you participate in, then you finish one topic, then you can start another one. I remember that when I was working at Chenrezig Institute with Geshe Jamang, who was the first teacher that I was working with, he used to take a lot of time to teach a text. So we studied Gampopa Jewel Ornament of Liberation over 3 years, and people were like, when are we going to finish this text? I want to study new text, how long it will go through, go on, and blah, blah, blah. And I think to myself, well, it's not that you finish the text and that's it, right? It's not that you finish the text and then you take an indefinite break and you do nothing. So you finish one thing and go on to the next one. So it doesn't really matter how long it takes, does it? But also, if we have finished studying one thing and we can go back and doing it again to go deeper. But at some point, we'll find out we need to then do something more advanced, or that we can also improve then, not only study something in an intellectual level, but also put it into practice. So having that combination of study, reflection, and meditation is something that all of our, at least Tibetan Buddhist teachers, emphasize. And being able to also give ourselves this space, mental space, to think that study is something that I do for the rest of my life. And that there's so much to know, so much to learn in the Buddhist tradition, but also you can say other traditions as well. There's so much to learn that I will just continue with that. But whatever I study, as much as I can, I will continue to think about it. Whatever I can, I will try to put it into practice. And so in this way, I think that it will be easier to develop that power of relinquishment, or the power of rest, in that we finish something, we're just going to continue study. Finish studying one text, we're going to take up the next. We finish doing one meditation practice, we're going to we've culminated it or we've perfected it. Now we're going to take another one, the next one in line. So then when we think about it as something that we do for the rest of our life, I think that it takes the edge off, or the pressure off. It's not that we feel that we have to then do everything right now and attain the state of enlightenment just within a few days, a few years, or a couple of decades. It's just something that we do for the rest of our life, because we trust that in terms of karma, it is the right thing to do. In terms of stability, something that we do for the rest of our life, so there's no pressure. In terms of joy, it will bring more joy into our life. I mean, sometimes it's hard to know. I've been involved with the Buddhist tradition since 1997, I think. That's when I started. And now I've been a monk for 11 years now. And so it's hard to think of what else would I be doing in my life, at least for now. It's not to say that that's the only way to live one's life, but for me, when I connected with the power of joy, of course, sometimes, living a life of a monk, so far I didn't have any major crisis or existential crisis or whatever, but sometimes a deluded mind, or afflicted mind, seeks entertainment. It is dissatisfied. It's not good enough. It's a little bit bored. But then whenever I think of what else could I be doing with my life, I can't think of something that would be more meaningful. So yeah, not everything has to be hunky-dory and entertaining and joyful and joyous and so forth. I can also have a shitty day, sorry, pardon my language. I can also have a bad day. It's okay. But just in the great scheme of things, when I think of what else could I be doing, well, I think, at least for me, nothing else that I could be doing that will bring me long-lasting happiness and satisfaction. And so I'm still joyous about being able to do so. Even if I have a few bad days, I can still do it. And sometimes when I think about it also, since I mentioned being a monk, sometimes when I think of some friends of mine that have decided to leave monasticism without, those that have decided to leave monasticism thought that if they'd be doing something else, it would bring them long-term happiness and satisfaction. I don't know if they've found it. It's hard to know. It's hard to find long-term happiness and satisfaction in samsara. Sometimes it's easy to find short-term happiness and satisfaction. Of course, it's not that there is no happiness and satisfaction whatsoever in samsara. Of course, there exist, but at least from a Buddhist perspective, they are short-lived. At some point, as Tsongkhapa says, suffering will reassert itself. That's the suffering of change. And so, thinking about it is a long-term project. Right? It's not just a whim. It's not something that I do just for a year or two. It's just something that I continue to do for the rest of my life, and therefore there is no pressure. I don't have to perform. Of course, I do have to perform to a certain degree in that I have to at least make sure that I keep my ethics, not just as a monk, but as a Buddhist practitioner, as much as possible, I keep it in a solid and good way. Gonna make improvement. So this is something that I do need to do. But apart from that, there's no reason to put extra pressure on myself. Yeah.
How much time can we take between two retreats?
How much break between two retreats? Well, a year or two.
Okay.
An episode or two. Okay. Of what? I think that it's probably, I guess, it's totally up to our personal circumstance. People go through different stations in their life. I think that if you're in an early phase of your life and you have family, and growing family, and you have work and so many responsibilities that you need to attend to, then you can simplify your life. Over the years in Australia, I met families that have decided to simplify their life. I think that it's growing increasingly more and more difficult because the cost of living is horrendous in Australia. So, it's way more difficult now to rearrange one's priorities and dedicate more time to study and practice. But still, there are ways in which we can simplify our life. But as we grow, I think, older and we have less responsibilities to our family and less responsibilities to other areas in our life, I think that we can do it. But then I think that we have to make sure that we still we do it joyfully. We don't pressure ourselves to do it. It's not a chore. It's not an obligation, something that we choose to do. If it's something that we choose to do, when we motivate ourselves to do it, it's way easier to do it. So just, I guess, find a stride. And also we're different to each other. I think that people have different strengths. Some people are really good on the intellectual part of Buddhism. Some people are not that good. Some people are kind of more prone to, let's say, shamatha practices. Some people are more prone to community service. So we do have a strength, but also we want to play to our strength, but also to make sure that we find enough time to do things which are not our strength. Because if we only do the things that we are good at, or the things that we like for example, I like studying, I find that meditation practice is harder, it means that I need to work more on meditation practice. Some people kind of really like meditation practice. The intellectual part does not speak to them at all. So you cannot force it, but I think that to develop a really holistic, comprehensive approach to a spiritual practice, it's good to include all of these different elements in our progress. So I didn't answer your question, I think. How much time? As much as it takes.
Eons and eons.
Eons and eons, yeah. Have you got any questions? Any comments?
Thank you, Venerable, for your talk. Just a couple of curiosities. One is around when you talk about a certain confidence in karma, I was wondering, struck by your remark about how you grew up in a secular. And many of us here, despite this Orientalist notion of Indians being Hindus and Buddhists, we've all grown in many ways in secular ideas about karma. So when we look at traditions of secular Buddhists or even the Abrahamic traditions, you also see a similarity in the notion of actions leading to negative or positive. And even when you see Islam or Christians, I don't know much about Jewish traditions, you do have the idea of the judgment, the day of judgment, which plays into this positive and negative. So if you keep aside the idea and conviction of rebirth, what are the other major differences between a Buddhist conception of karma as opposed to this commonsensical idea of good and bad?
So I'll just kind of maybe have a short summary of your question for the people that are listening through Zoom. And so the question was in relation to karma. I will paraphrase some of the things that you said because I can't remember them word to word. But you said that when I spoke about having grown in Israel as being secular with the notion of karma not existing in my background, you said that also here in India, many people grow as like having a more day-to-day or more, let's say, secular approach to karma. So still keeping in mind that certain actions produce positive results, certain actions yield negative results. So then thinking of the continuity of consciousness as being a repository for actions that are being carried from previous life to this life, what are the notions of karma can we speak of? I forgot the last part of your question. Can you help me, please?
Yeah. So if we keep the idea of rebirth separately, are there any differences?
All right. If we keep the notion of rebirth separately, don't speak about it. Also, are there similar similarities in terms of karma across different traditions? Islam, Christianity, Hindu traditions. I think that in general, when you look at different religions, different spiritual traditions, there are traditions which have philosophical background and those who do not have a set of philosophical or theistic approaches. When I speak of traditions that have a philosophy, it's not that, they don't necessarily need to have a philosophy that is deep or really worked out, but I guess that when you look at Hindu traditions, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, there is a philosophical aspect to these traditions, and all of them speak of ethics. I think that the question is who dictates those types of ethics. So when I think of theistic religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, the one that has dictated or came up with a formulation of ethics is a creator God. So God gave us either the Ten Commandments or other texts that have to do with ethics, and they describe what is positive and what is negative, what is right and what is wrong, in a way that is similar across many different traditions. Of course, not all things are the same. I was just like an anecdote. Jado Rinpoche visited Australia. Actually, I think they're still in Australia, but I saw him in Australia about a month ago, and he gave amazing teachings at Chimrezik Institute. And when he left, I went to see him again at the airport to say goodbye, and I offered a kata, and then he said, if I have time, maybe I can sit with him and go through the 10 Commandments. with him. And so I had to go to Google the 10 Commandments, because it's been quite a lot of time, a very long time since I thought of the 10 Commandments. So now one of them was like, you shall not, I don't know, I can't remember how to say it in English, but you shouldn't swear by God's name in vain. And I was saying, oh my God is somewhat sacrilegious. Anyway, or I swear to God, this is sacrilege. Anyway, and so there are things which are specific to different traditions, that's the point, and things which are common to others. Like, for example, one should not kill or steal or lie and so forth. Of course, there are some things which are specific, like, for example, across the Buddhist tradition, all killing is negative. In theistic religion, murder is negative, killing another human being. But still, there are commonalities, and there are things which are different. In the Buddhist tradition, ethics was not given by God. There's no external force that dictates what we need, what we do, and what we do not do. In a sense that the Buddha is not someone that punishes us or does not reward us. But still, in terms of ethics, it's quite similar to Christian, Muslim, or Jewish ethics in some with many things, in many areas. But then, when you look at Buddhist ethics, there's a twofold divisions into two types of ethics, which there are things which are negative by nature, killing, stealing. Actually, when you look at the 10 non-virtues, apart from putting aside wrong views, not killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle chatter, covetousness, and malice, there are things which are negative by nature. Whether you have a spiritual inclination, whether you have no spiritual inclination whatsoever, those things are considered to be negative by nature because they produce problems to ourselves. They harm us and they also harm others. When you look at other traditions, and this is not, we don't have to speak about rebirth, we can just look at other traditions and see that the majority of them are also found within other traditions, abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so forth. Of course, differences in the fine print, but in general, pretty similar. And then there are things which are called proscribed misdeeds. And they have to do with formulated ethics. Like, for example, for me as a monk, I have a set of rules that I need to abide by. And many of them have to do with things, I need to abstain from things which were prescribed by the Buddha, not because they're negative by nature, but because the way that Buddhist ethics have evolved is, when you look at this set of teachings pertaining to Vinaya, it is said that at some point in time when the Buddha was alive, something unfortunate happened. Some followers of the Buddha had misbehaved, and then a new rule was set in place. So this is how monasticism came about, or the rules for monasticism came about. So, like, for example, as a monk, I shouldn't be drinking alcohol. It's not something that is negative by nature, but it's a prescribed misdeed to drink alcohol. Or, for example, I should not be apart from my blessed robes for a certain amount of time. So, again, it is something that was prescribed within the rules, but it's not a negative misdeed. In that it's not a natural misdeed. In that if it was natural misdeed, it would have applied to everyone without exception. And so, how is it connected with what you've asked? Maybe I'm just kind of blabber.
I think the deviation is that you've got into the nature of morality.
Yeah.
But we need to move from the difference in the nature of morality to how does it impact the idea of karma, the practice.
I think that kind of, when you look at the nature of morality, probably the very basics are things which are natural misdeeds, which is irrespective of your spiritual affiliation, would be considered to be negative across all traditions. And so I guess that when you think about it, not in relation to rebirth, but just in terms of living in society, human society, and wanting to have societies which are more harmonious and thriving. And this is where also I think people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama have introduced secular ethics, which are based on those set of rules. I think that they make our life in human societies way better, way more protected, and way harmonious with each other, because we abstain from things which are natural misdeeds, negative by nature. And so I think that probably transcends rebirth. Whether you believe in rebirth or not, it's still valid. Yeah, so it took me quite a lot of words to get there. Sorry. Don't worry. Sorry? Tomer. Hey, Tomer. Can I do anything?
Yes. Thank you, Yaki, to that. So my question is about continuation of consciousness and rebirth. Like, I also grew up similar to you, like secular Jewish in Israel, also a software engineer, and I'm exploring it for some time, and I have some troubles with it. So I'm happy if you could share some thoughts, in particular on like why is the consciousness separate from matter and not just merely arising from matter, in a bit like the way that software is not hardware, but software is arisen from hardware. So the first, you would not say that there is a previous moment of software before there is hardware. Just any thoughts if you have on it? And also in general, like, how do you suggest to explore this question? Because I assume that I will not get a complete answer to my question at the end of your thoughts.
Yeah.
So just how do you suggest to explore it, like in general, as something which is worth exploring as a Buddhist practitioner to gain conviction in karma beyond just one lifetime?
So I'll repeat your question and also maybe paraphrase it a little bit. And so the question is, I spoke about a continuity of consciousness in relation to the repository of karma that is traveling from previous lifetimes and beyond. And so we say in Buddhism that consciousness, that are body and mind, currently they're codependent, but they're not the same thing. Consciousness is not physical, and also at least from a Buddhist perspective, it can exist without a body. So how can we think about it? Also, Thomas said that he's a software engineer, so we speak about software and hardware. So software arises from hardware, but it is not hardware. Anyway, so can I say some more about it? So when you look at a continuity of consciousness from a Buddhist perspective, the proofs which are given in texts that were composed by great masters such as Dignaga and Dharmakirti, that explain or that provide some syllogisms, some formulations that prove the existence of past and future lifetimes. And although they're called proofs for the existence of past and future lifetimes, at least for me, they're not acting as like solid proofs, in a sense that it's not like I was proven and therefore my life has changed now and I completely get it. No, there's like logical tools that you can use in order to then think of the continuity of consciousness. And so I think that the underlying assumption that is made is that the mind is non-matter, it is not physical. And I think that all of us can, at some point, come to see that in a more experiential way. And that takes some time because when you, I think, start to meditate and start to recognize your own mind, you do start to see how, first of all, there's the experience, not just the experiences yourself, but the experience itself, which is non-physical. I'm now saying words, but this is really something that needs to be taken into one's meditation practice in order to really feel or experience consciousness. But anyway, the underlying premise for that is that consciousness is non-physical. And they say that the physical cannot produce the non-physical, in the sense that the body cannot produce consciousness. Stones and pebbles cannot produce a consciousness. The only thing that can produce a consciousness is a previous moment of consciousness or an imprint. So there's a certain degree of distance that you can go with that. You still need to take that into also your meditation practice or into your reflection and work it out to see how far or how deep you can go with that. And then there's some other things which are introduced to it. So to begin with, habits. And so we have habits in our life. Some of them can be explained and some of them cannot be explained. Some of us are more artistic, some of us are more intellectual, some of us are more prone to anger, some of us are more prone to attachment, some of us are more prone to being open-minded and compassionate and so forth. We have different strengths. When I think of myself and my siblings, we're so different to each other, although we grew up in the same household. We share so much genetic material, but we are very different. So it's not a proof that therefore my habits in this life come from imprints that I've cultivated in my previous life, but it's something to add into the process of contemplation. At least from a Buddhist perspective, we say that the reason, one more reason to thinking that there is a continuity of consciousness that connects past and future lifetimes is the different habits that we have, which are attributed to imprints. And then the next thing is also having discussions with or conversations with people that have recollections from past lifetimes. And this is actually quite tricky because not every account that you listen to or that, from someone firsthand, someone that is telling you the firsthand recollection, or you hear it secondhand or you read it in a book, how would you know that you can actually trust that and take that as a proof? I mean, I'm quite a doubtful person. If someone says A, I'm quite prone to say, I don't think so. It's probably B. No, that's probably another karmic imprint that I've accumulated from before. But anyway, but I have, one of my closest teachers, Father Ani and I have the same, share the same teacher. He told me some stories about. His name is Tukutsewan Kunchab. He lives now in Taiwan. And he told me some stories about his father that was also an incarnation. He's also an incarnation of another Lama. And he told me about some recollections that he had in his previous life, from his previous life, and so on and so forth. And so I have so much trust and faith and admiration to him that it's easier for me to accept those stories as they are likely to be true than other people that tell me stories about past and future lifetimes. So that also works, or it's another thing that we add into the conversation. Some people that have recollections from past lifetime, and because you have some connection with those people, you trust them, or at least you keep an open mind. That could be the case. It's not unlikely. It could be true. And so we add that to the discussion. And at least those are the things that are now kind of that I can suggest to work with now. But also I think that then when you also give yourself some time to continue your study and reflection over time, when I think of the things that I have come to see as true or valid from the teachings that I've got in the past, either when I've studied Madhyamika, when I studied mind training, I can see the validity of the teachings of the Buddha, and I can analyze them, I can investigate it, and consider they're true. And there are things which are now beyond my capacity to verify. But I can still think that if other teachings are true, I can keep an open mind and think that they're likely to be true. Even if I haven't ascertained them or realized them in a very profound way, I think that, I think that they're likely true, but I can't force it. I can't be dogmatic about it because I haven't realized it, in a very profound way. But at least for the time being, I'm more open to it.
Thank you, Yaki.
Do we still have time? So what's the time frame? All right.
Thank you, Venerable. Again,
No worry.
This is a follow-up on what you just said. The distinction between mind and body seems to be easier to grasp for me. But the difficulty comes back to the original question of what is it that takes karma from one life to the other? And typically we get an answer, it's the mind. And then when we move more and more into certain kinds of Buddhist philosophy, we see mind itself as a projection of something. And then we get into some traditions like Yogacara, Chittamatra, where you say it's the alaya vijnana which takes it. So then we end up with this image of this is something solid, not physically, but something non-physically solid on which your karma gets attached and move from life to life to life. And yet there is a distinction between the soul and the mind. And this would feel like it is a soul, the Hindu idea of the soul, which is very much negated in Buddhist traditions. So can I please then ask you for some clarification of your understanding between the difference between the soul and the mind, because of this?
All right, and so the question is in relation to what is the actual repository of karmic imprints that go from this lifetime to the next. So now we say in general that that's the consciousness that travels from this lifetime to the next, but also there are different Indian philosophies, like for example the Chittamatrins, the Yogacara, that I said this alaya vijnana that goes from one life to the next, and that's the actual me, and that is the repository of karmic imprints. But then we also speak about the soul, so the actual question was what's the differences between mind and soul. But I will take your question if you don't mind, and I will also elaborate on some other things which can be said. And so first off, I think that the word soul doesn't have like a parallel within Buddhist philosophy. So there's no soul in Buddhist philosophy. And when I try to think about it, at least from a theistic background, let's say Jewish background, although I grew up as being completely secular, I don't know if there is like a textbook, a dictionary definition of soul. But I think that when you look at Buddhist tenets, and they speak about, they juxtapose the type of selflessness, no self in the Buddhist tradition. And the self that they do accept, they start with refuting a type of self that some Hindu traditions assert. And they say that there is a notion of self that is permanent, independent, and unitary. It doesn't exist. So then I try to think of what would be a soul within Jewish understanding, and there's no definition for that. It's more like just something that is accepted as a popular culture. But I think that it would have those features of being permanent. Like, this is who I am, that eternal sense of self. It is me. It is what I've always been. That's the very core of me. It's not changeable. It's the thing that is making me to be being that unique individual person. So permanent, independent, and unitary. So that kind of thing is not accepted at all in the Buddhist tradition. But then, when we think of what is the thing that goes from life to life, I connected it with karma because essentially we say that actions that we do in this life do not go to waste, and actions that I've not done, I will not experience the result of those actions. So what is the thing that connects between life to life? After all, if there's nothing that acts as a repository for karma, to take all those karmic imprints, the whole notion of karma will fall apart, and whatever actions I do in this life, they're valid only to this life. I will not experience the results in future lives, and also in this life, I do not experience the results of actions done in the past if there is no repository for that karmic imprint. And so we speak a lot about finding the person. Who is the real person? And the question, the need to find the real person, or part of the needs, is in order to link up karma. Who is the person that is actually experiencing the result of those actions? And so many Buddhist philosophies say that there is no soul, in that there is no Atman. But the thing that goes from this lifetime to the next and carries all those karmic imprints is the consciousness, and therefore the real person is the consciousness, because that real person is the one that will carry actions from previous life to the next life. And so in general we say that, yeah, that's the vessel for karmic imprints. But then comes the Madhyamika Prasangika philosophy, who says that actually that's not good enough. It's not good enough because if you say that the consciousness is that which takes karmic imprints from this lifetime to the next, you would have asserted something that is findable. Like you look at the makeup of a person, the body and mind, and you're trying to find the real person. And if what takes the karmic imprints from this lifetime to the next is the consciousness, you've found the real person, the actual person. So it's not good enough. And so then masters such as Tsongkhapa, based on Chandrakirti's writing, comes up with this, with an answer to that is so profound that is like completely blows your mind, in a sense that it's very difficult to understand what he said, what the meaning of that. So it says, they say, Chandrakirti and Tsongkhapa, they say that karmic imprints are being infused on the mere eye. So the mere eye is that which goes from this lifetime to the next. Yeah, you can say that imprints can be placed upon mental consciousness, but it's actually the mere eye that is going from this lifetime to the next, and this is the basis for infusing karmic imprints. And so I can say the words, but what the profound implication of that is, it's something that kind of I'm still going back and forth, in my mind. It's all kind of, it's pretty, it's quite a heavy loaded philosophical idea. And so, yeah, you have the Chittamatrin speak about the Alaya Vijnana, and the Madhyamika Svatantrika say that it's the primary consciousness, the primary mental consciousness, but Prasangika would say the actual one is the mere eye, whatever that might be. Yeah. Yeah.
Since you spoke on the joyous effort today, I was wondering, do you think joyous effort can ever be counterproductive also?
Can joyous effort ever be counterproductive? In what sense?
I'm asking you.
You're asking me. I think that probably. I think
Let's
that.
say if you're joyous
Yeah.
all the time,
I think that.
enthusiastic about whatever you're doing.
I think that you have to be smart about it. I think that when you're not smart about it, it can be counterproductive, in a sense that the first of all, the word joyous within joyous effort might sound as if like you're really happy all the time, or like enthused about all the time. And I don't think that's necessarily the case that you're totally enthused about doing the right thing all the time. But it's still kind of knowing kind of deep inside that what is right and what is wrong, and knowing that you do need to do what is right, even though you don't feel like overjoyed at the moment, but still having that sense of persistence that that will allow you to continue with that. Because I think that maybe, I'm just thinking while speaking, thinking on my feet, although I'm sitting. I think that probably something that would be counterproductive would be to think that to have joyous effort, you always have to be happy. You always need to have that, kind of that sense of happiness and like enthusiasm that is brimming after your mind. It's not always there, but it's still, I think that when you have the deep sense of satisfaction from knowing that you're still doing, like, for example, what Lama Zopa Rinpoche wanted you to do. Like, for example, when I think of difficult things that my teacher wanted me to do. And like speaking in a way that is unpleasant. I mean, not speaking in a way that is unpleasant, but working out unpleasant situations when you know that someone is not going to be happy. I guess that as a director, sometimes you have situations where you know what's the right thing to do for the center, but you know that not everyone's going to be happy about it. Yeah, so you're not doing it with that sense of amazing, 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 I'm so happy, but you're still enthused about it because you know that it's going to be good. So maybe counterproductive sense of joyous effort, I wouldn't say that it's joyous effort, but having wrong idea about it, thinking that you always need to be happy, that you always need to derive joy from it. Not everything is going to be joyous short term, but you still kind of think that that's the right thing to do. So that's one thing. And another thing that is counterproductive is to be joyous about things which you haven't thought through well to begin with. And so I remember that one of the first set of teachings that I've attended in my, in my early years of engaging with Buddhist studies was when Geshe Sonam Rinchen was teaching shamatha at the Tibetan Library of Works and Archives. I was deeply inspired. I think that also it happens with people that are deeply inspired by teachings. I think that there's nothing else I need to be doing other than that. I didn't do that. I didn't go into retreat and practice shamatha until I attended. But I think that had I done it, probably I would have given up after a short time. So that sense of enthusiasm that comes at the beginning, but without enough knowledge, without giving it enough thought, the one that would have probably caused me to just leave things half done. So that sense of, maybe that's a counterproductive sense of joyous effort that doesn't have the power of stability. And so when Shantideva or Tsongkhapa described those 4 powers, it's like if you really want to develop joyous effort that will allow you to have continuity, this is what you need to do. And of course, we don't have all of them now, but we can still have joyous effort. It just means that our joyous effort is likely to be more short-lived or incomplete. And so long term, what we want to do is to work on developing, bringing to completion the 4 powers, but it is a matter of constant practice. The more we practice the 4 powers, the more we're able to continue doing what we do. Does it make sense?
We have talked about we should have the self-confidence and we should not submit to our inflicting mind.
Mm-hmm.
We should develop that self-confidence. That self-confidence can also be a willpower of a sort.
Mm-hmm.
But in our practice, our day-to-day practice, we basically what we do is we interpret our karma in a relativistic way, according to our own things. We know that we are doing the thing which we are doing is not completely right.
Yeah.
But we still follow and juggle between things satisfy the look what we are doing. Oh, it's fine. So these things, these thoughts are just coming in our minds, and we submit to our inflicting mind.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate on this? Why this happened and what we should do to not submit to our inflicting?
Yeah. And so in relation to the power of stability, one of the prides that we develop is pride over the afflictions, in which we think that I'm not going to submit to my afflictive states of mind. I will vanquish them. I will conquer my afflictive states of mind. But still you say that in our daily life, we have to make so many compromises. We've come across different situations, and our afflictive states of mind rise up again, and we need to make a decision. And our decisions are sometimes, the decision-making process is often controlled by our afflictive states of mind, or kind of we downplay the power of our afflictive states of mind. And I think that's a really honest observation, because all of us, I think, it happens to all of us. And so, first of all, when we speak of the power of to have pride over the affliction, we need to develop at least that sense of determination, to as much as we can to exert control over the mind, but at the same time to know that we are not there yet, because had we been able to exert complete control of our mind, there would have been no need for us to adopt ethical discipline. We would all already been disciplined. And so we develop it to, I guess, our effort, our intentionalities to weight intentionality. One of them is to think that I will do my best. And another one, the second way, is to think that I will fail. And I have practices of purification. So purifying negative actions. But also, as I speak about it, as I think through speaking, but also I think that we need to cut ourselves some slack on, with our daily life, in that often our daily life are involved with decisions which are not easy to make. And so we're making a decision to our best ability. And so we need to also be honest about what our motivations are. Often we speak about a motivation in the Buddhist tradition as like a linear type of motivation, as if we have only one motivation for doing a certain action. But when we examine our daily life, I think that often we see that we have a combination of motivations. Some of them are positive, some of them are not that positive, some of them are rather self-interested, some of them are also involved with seeking the benefit of others. All of them are present in a set of motivations that we bring into our actions. And so I think that first of all, we need to be honest to us with respect to ourselves about what our motivations was, and even if what they were, and even when we admit to ourselves that some of them were not totally honest or wholesome, we can think that, well, that's what I can do now, and I want to improve in the future. So the first step is to recognize our mind. But when I say the first step, it's not easy to recognize our mind, because we also need to have some knowledge, about how the mind works, sit with our mind, be honest to ourselves, with ourselves, being able to recognize different types of afflictive emotions, also to be able to recognize positive emotions, positive states of mind. And once we recognize our mind or a certain situation to be what it is, with a sense of honesty, we can also then deal with, first of all, the things which predominate in our mind. And so, since we are different to each other, we have different afflictive emotions that predominate. For some of us, anger predominates. For some of us, attachment. For some of us, jealousy. For some of us, pride. So we have to work out what is the most pressing issue for ourselves at the moment and start with that. And when we start with that, we have the process of purification, which is not just about sitting down and reciting something, but it's about, first of all, calling a spade in the sense that we recognize, first of all, be honest with ourselves, recognize what's the problem with our state of mind is. We rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and also refuge. We also rely upon bodhicitta as what we rely upon in our spiritual practice. We develop that determination to do better. In Buddhist terminology, we say we turn our back to that. But actually, being more practical, we want to do better in the future. And to do better in the future is step by step to reduce those afflictive emotions and to develop an attitude that is more outlooking at others rather than just being focused on ourselves. And then the actual remedies are developing states of mind which are opposite to negative states of mind that motivates us. So in the Buddhist tradition, often it is said that you sit down and you do some mantra recitations, or you do circumambulations, or you read sutras. All of them are good things. But the actual antidote that we develop is counterforces to our afflictive states of mind. And so when we find that it is rather, we don't know, we're being a bit selfish in pursuing a certain project, or we do it at the expense of others, it's hard to avoid that altogether. So we think that I'm going to do better through thinking of the welfare of others. Everyone wants to be happy. No one wants to suffer. I would try to act in a way that will bring less damage to others. I will try my best. So I think that over time, if we kind of take that into our practice, I think that over years we're going to make progress. But also, I think that it happens to me from time to time, kind of a thing that, well, I didn't act in a skillful way. Actually, it was a big fall. So I don't need to make amends. And I continue with my practice, and I see that as a long-term goal for the rest of my life. Yes. So that's what I can say for the time being. Tika? All right.
Unless you want to take one last question, a quick one.
It's not a quick one.
Okay. I thought that you said that I saw your discussion. I thought that you had enough, that you're throwing the towel.
You made quite a revelation that the idea of I.
Yeah.
So our karmic imprints, imprint themselves on I. So what happens when there is no I, when there is a dissolution of I?
So, I mean, I just made it, I don't know if it's a comment in passing, but it is kind of, the terminology that is used in Buddhist philosophy is distinguishing between the I that exists and the I that does not exist. So the no I is referring to what kind of I doesn't exist. The I that doesn't exist is an independent, inherent, objective sense of self. That is the no I. But there's an I that does exist, and this is what is called, from the viewpoint of the Madhyamika Prasangika perspective, a merely imputed I. So waking up what it means takes a lot of time, So there are texts and books that you can read. I think that probably, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, particularly in the Gelug tradition, to study that for so many years, so it's hard going. But there are books that make it more accessible, like, for example, How to Know Yourself as You Really Are by His Honesty Dalai Lama. And I know that offers a good explanation, very good explanation, but also some meditation instructions that His Honest gives. So that's easy, I think, or makes it slightly easier to get a head around. And also, I think that the idea is that the I that does exist, which is the repository for karmic imprints, is the one that exists in a nominal way. So it is merely imputed I that doesn't exist from its own side. What it is, it's like, takes a lot of time to understand. Yeah, so that's the I that is the repository for karmic imprints.
Thank you very much for taking out the time. I know you have to go to the airport and catch your flight to Israel tonight.
No, actually that's tomorrow. So yeah, I can kind of sleep in tomorrow.
Okay, good.
Sleep in, have breakfast.
Okay, good.
Make my way to the airport.
So thank you so much, and please come back again.
Thank you. Can I offer it back to the center?
No, so you please keep it. Please.
All right.
You need to go to the airport.
Okay. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for Renuka, and for Nico, who organized it and chased me. I'm a total disaster in terms of committing to do something, so I apologize. And so we will finish off with also dedicating whatever positive potential we've created together. If you find something useful today, then you can dedicate it to whatever positive goal you have in your mind. And I think that first and foremost, we have great teachers that lead this organization, or Tibetan Buddhism in general. So we still need them in our life to continue to be shining examples of the values that we, or the qualities that we want to embody, that we want to develop in our own mind, so that in depends upon that, if we continue to experience the blessings, we will be able to also develop bodhicitta in our own mind, and to make it flourish all the way to the attainment of the state of Buddhahood for the sake of all living beings. And so if we think that we're going to dedicate it for that, may the precious mind of enlightenment that is not yet born, may it be born in our mind. May that already born, may it never diminish, but increase more and more. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
And happy Diwali.
Yes.
Yeah. So is Diwali is it happening for 2 more days?
Well, it's always for 2 days, a small Diwali and the big Diwali.
Okay.
But this time I think the big Diwali is for 2 days.
Okay.
It was in Delhi yesterday, in Punjab it's today, in certain states. Yeah. I don't know why this regional variation.
I mean, the only reason that I ask it is that I was trying to find out if Sarvana Bhavan is open today. So, and it was open, and I was like, it was very good lunch that I had there. But anyway, it says like 4 days of Diwali, So, thank you very much for Diwali. I had very good lunch today. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your night, and hopefully we meet again.